Good afternoon, everybody. I call the session out of recess and call the Senate to order and recognize Senator Carson for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn from the late session.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion to adjourn passes. We are now in the early session. The Senate will please be attentive to our chaplain, Father Stephen Lawson. Good afternoon, sir.
Let us bow our heads. Gracious and almighty Creator, as we gather this afternoon, we humbly bow our heads in your presence. We come before you with hearts filled with gratitude for the privilege of serving as stewards of the great state of New Hampshire. Grant, O Lord, wisdom to these legislators, that their deliberations be guided by humility, compassion, and courage. Bless the staff members and aides with understanding as they navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Protect the family and friends of these senators who have sacrificed so much so their family members can serve our state. We ask that you look over Paula Perkins and provide solace to her family, especially Senator Perkins-Kwoka. As we embark on this legislative journey, may your grace be our compass, and may our efforts be directed toward building a stronger state. In your name we pray. Amen.
Could we have a moment of silence, please, for Senator Perkins-Kwoka's mom? Thank you. Senator Abbas, could you lead us in the pledge? Well, there he is.
Appreciate it. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Introduction of guests. Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor of introducing some folks that are here from CSG. First, we have Mr. David Biet. He is the Executive Director of the Eastern Region. We also have a former colleague of ours, a former Representative Tara Sad, who co-chairs the Agriculture Committee. Unfortunately, another former colleague, Representative Bob Hefner, had to leave. But please join me in welcoming them. And before you do that, the Eastern Region meeting is taking place in Baltimore this summer. So if anybody is interested in going, come see me. All right? Thank you. Welcome.
Senator D'Allesandro.
I was going to repeat it. I'll give you the second version. It'll be almost the same as the first. I want to introduce my colleagues from the Council of State Governments who are here, who are doing a super job for us, and to recommend that everyone attend the conference in Baltimore. I think it'll be a winner. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Avard.
Former Chief of Staff up here, Christy Merrill.
Further introduction of guests. Without objection, the following bill is special ordered to March 7th, Senate Bill 219 in the Committee on Finance. Without objection, today's fiscal note Finance report is adopted. Removed from the consent calendar from ED&A, Senate Bill 483 by Senator Carson. And also from ED&A, Senate Bill 484 by myself. Senator Carson moves that the consent calendar with the relevant amendments as printed in the day's calendar be adopted, and that all such bills found ought to pass be ordered as follows. FN bills not waived under Senate Rule 4.5 to the Committee on Finance, non-FN bills approved for referral to Finance by the day's FN report to the Committee on Finance, and all other bills to third reading. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The consent calendar is adopted. Moving to the regular calendar, the Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Education, to which was referred Senate Bill 342 FN, an act relative to school building aid funding. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 3-1. Senator Lang for the committee.
Senator Lang.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 342 ought to pass as amended. This critical legislation to provide school districts with a modern, sustainable, and predictable building aid model. To accommodate significant demand for building aids, Senate Bill 342 would reestablish the Building Aid Fund and would further reconfigure the aid selection process. As amended, each school district would have access to a dedicated sinking fund for the purposes of building aid. For utilization, districts may submit a building aid plan for approval by the Department of Education, which is subsequently voted on by the local voters. The pre-existing school building aid program would gradually be drawn down over the course of a decade, culminating in the complete replacement and an $80 million appropriation per biennium for the new building aid program established by Senate Bill 342. For the purpose of maintaining our facilities and enhancing efficiency of our aid, I ask you to join the Senate Education Committee in considering passage of Senate Bill 342 as ought to pass as amended, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lang. The bill is now on second reading. The first order of business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. A roll call has been requested since the chair was in doubt. Thank you. Has it been seconded? The roll call. Senator Lang second, Senator Avard moved for a roll call. If you're in favor of the committee amendment, you would vote aye. If you're opposed to that, you would vote no. The clerk will please call the roll.
Senator Gendreau.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Prentice.
No.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innis.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
No.
Senator Chanley.
No.
Senator Avard.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
No.
Senator Carson.
Yes.
Senator Whitley.
No.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Susi.
No.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator D'Allesandro.
No.
Senator Perkins-Kwoka.
No.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
No.
And Senator Bradley.
Yes. The ayes have it on the amendment 14-10. The question is on adoption of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 342. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass as amended is adopted. Senate Bill 342 is ordered to finance. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Election Law and Municipal Affairs, to which was referred Senate Bill 489 FN, an act relative to election audits. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 3-0. Senator Gray for the committee.
Senator Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 489 ought to pass with amendment
This bill, as amended, requires the Secretary of State to conduct random audits of a percentage of the ballot counting devices used in the state primary and general election. Post-election audits are considered the best practice to ensure election results are accurate. Additionally, they are an effective tool to ensure transparency and improve voter confidence. The post-election audits conducted in the last 2 years were successful, and Senate Bill 489 makes the post-election audits a permanent process in New Hampshire's election law. The committee amendment incorporates a few technical changes and requires that all audits are completed before the recount is conducted. The Election Law and Municipal Affairs Committee asks for your support on the motion of ought to pass as amended on 489. And I will note that there may be an amendment coming from one of the other senators, and I believe that to be a replace all. So if you are in favor of the other amendment, would not preclude you from voting yes on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gray. So the question is on adoption of the committee amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The committee amendment is not adopted. I recognize Senator Susi to introduce floor amendment 802.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the amendment is being distributed, I want to thank my colleague, the chair of the Election Law Committee, for his thoughtful remarks regarding audits. He and I had the opportunity to serve on a study committee where we examined this issue and have continued to work to make sure that there are proper audits conducted and that we continue to increase confidence in what we know to be the integrity of our very important system. We adopted a committee amendment that included several parts, and when I had the opportunity to review it in the calendar, I noticed there was one piece that was omitted. This floor amendment includes everything that the committee adopted with one additional part. If you look on page 2 at the bottom, in what starts on line 28, there was another bill we had incorporated in which asks that the Secretary of State publish the recounts and procedures, which was a bill Senator Perkins-Kwoka had filed. And then the other part was the part I wanted to incorporate, which the committee did talk about, that requires the Secretary of State to complete all the audits before recounts start, so that there's all of one process before you start the next, since an audit could lead to a request for a recount. With that, I hope my colleagues would vote favorably upon this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Susi. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of the floor amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor of the floor amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The floor amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading and open for further discussion or amendment. Seeing no further discussion, the question is on ought to pass as amended. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Senate Bill 489 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Election Law and Municipal Affairs, to which was referred Senate Bill 490 FN, an act relative to the verification of the checklist. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment for a vote of 2 to 1. Senator Gray for the committee.
Senator Gray.
President, I move Senate Bill 490 ought to pass with amendment. This bill, as amended, changes the verification of the voter checklist from every 10 years to every 5 years beginning in 2026. This bill will increase the accuracy of the checklist and instill confidence and integrity in the Hampshire election process. This legislation, along with the improvements in the statewide voter registration system, will reduce the time required to perform the update and allow for more frequent updates of the checklist. The Election Law and Municipal Affairs Committee asks for your support in a motion of ought to pass with amendment on Senate Bill 490. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gray. The bill is now on second reading. The first order of business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it, I believe. The committee amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion or amendment? Senator Soucy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise in opposition to the current bill as amended, but I want to make very, very clear there's no disagreement that New Hampshire should strive to keep up its voter rolls, keep them up to date, and keep them as clean as possible. No dispute whatsoever. I think we all agree. The question is how we go about it, and I don't think this bill is the right way to go because I don't think it employs the right tools. For example, this body passed a bill to allow for an election information portal. New Hampshire has started using the NCOA, the National Change of Address data, as well to keep our voter rolls updated. Just this past month, the Secretary of State testified that the new centralized statewide database will also make it easier to track vital records, such as death records, which will help keep our rolls more up to date. The House right now has a bipartisan bill to have New Hampshire join a consortium of other states to share data that once again will help us to better track movers between states, in-state, and help us identify any cases of potential fraud. All very important tools and things that we should employ. The problem with this bill, though, is that instead of just using these tools that we are making available to keep the voter rolls clean, the bill would remove a voter merely for the fact they've missed an election. So if a voter has been on the rolls for 50 years, only chooses to vote in presidential elections once every 4 years, this time around they say, you know, I don't really like the two nominees, I'm not going to choose to vote. That inactivity would lead to that voter being removed, and that doesn't seem right, Mr. President. The Constitution guarantees the right to vote for any U.S. citizen residing in New Hampshire who's 18 years of age. Nowhere does it specify that the voter has to continuously vote. Why should that voter have to go back and prove that they are in fact a properly registered voter? Removing voters from the rolls solely because we feel they've not shown up enough adds extra stressors to our local election officials who will inevitably have more people showing up on election day and trying to do same-day registration because they won't realize potentially that they've been removed. So they're going to have to, our election officials on a busy presidential election, have the potential of having to deal with even more unhappy voters showing up, when in fact the only thing they did was choose not to exercise the right that they already properly have. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I believe we should focus on keeping our voting rolls clean and accurate and not removing voters from our checklist who just choose not to exercise that right every opportunity they have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Soucy. Further discussion. Senator Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly, I understand the concerns that my fellow senator has expressed, but I believe that they are not founded. When we looked at the number of people who were scheduled for removal from the list this time, it was a considerable number. The New Hampshire population is much more mobile now than it was before. 5 or 10 years ago, they were saying that the average length that a person owns a home in New Hampshire is 5 years. When they move, their registration in the voter database at least needs to change, if not needs to change locality because they've changed their domicile. I agree that we are doing things like going to the post office, permanent change of address, to try to do that. But we're also sending out what they call 30-day letters. And that 30-day letter says, hey, your name has come up because you haven't voted in, right now it says 10 years, et cetera. So we have a protection. And that person, simply by contacting the town clerk, city clerk, can get back on that list very, very easily and very quickly, and should not pose an issue. I did send out to the committee the actual percentages of number of people removed, and it was a considerable number in the tens of percent a voter. And the people who actually did re-register was in the order of 3 or 4%. Again, I wasn't thinking I would need to put those numbers out in front of you today, so I didn't commit them to memory. And the rules of the Senate don't allow me to go back into my computer and pull them off. So, but again, we are trying to instill voter confidence. When we have a large percentage of voters who are not domiciled in that or have not voted in a long time, or when a campaign sends out campaign materials and the materials are returned because the address is not valid, those are legitimate concerns, and it does cause people to lose some of their confidence in our system. So the original bill had us doing this every 2 years, and only looking back 2 years, that to me was not the way to go. We needed this interim step. We can evaluate it after 2026, which is when the next one, according to this bill, would happen, and then if further changes are needed, or we've made it simple enough in the system that we can do it more frequently without causing problems. I would support Senator the senator from District 18, and support co-sponsoring a bill with her. But right now, I believe that this bill does satisfy what we need. It makes a major step forward in cutting that process time, the length of that time in half. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gray. The question is on adoption of ought to pass as amended. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. I believe the ayes have it. You going to sing again, Senator? I believe the ayes have it. I see no request for a division or roll call. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted, and Senate Bill 490 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Election Law and Municipal Affairs, to which was referred, Senate Bill 491, an act relative to authorizing municipalities to enter into voluntary agreements with owners of private roads. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 3-0. Senator Soucy for the committee.
Senator Soucy.
Thank you again, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 491 ought to pass with amendment. This bill, as amended, will allow legislative bodies of municipalities to enter into agreements with owners of private roads. This enabling legislation will broaden the scope of authority that municipalities will have to negotiate with property owners. There are times when it is in the interest of the town to repair or maintain a private road. However, under current law, they don't have the authority to do so. This legislation would allow those negotiations and require written consent from all property owners, and further does not obligate the municipality to indefinitely maintain the road. The committee amendment makes clear that it is the legislative body who may choose to adopt this provision. The Election Law and Municipal Affairs Committee asks for your support on the motion of ought to pass with amendment on Senate Bill 491. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Soucy. The bill is now on second reading. The first order of business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of ought to pass as amended. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass as amended is adopted. Senate Bill 491 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Election Law and Municipal Affairs, to which was referred Senate Bill 530, an act relative to reports of receipts and expenditures filed by political committees of candidates and candidates. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 3-0. Senator Abbas for the committee.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move SB 530 ought to pass with amendment. This bill, as amended, makes provisions for the reporting of receipts and expenditures filed by political committees of candidates and the candidates themselves. The intent of these provisions is to provide consistency and clarity when the reports are filed and posted online. Currently, the Secretary of State's office receives many complaints from the public due to illegible reports published to the online campaign finance system. SB 530 addresses these complaints by requiring specific font and document formats to be filed for the reports. Additionally, the committee amendment clarifies that non-compliant reports will not be accepted or published by the Secretary of State. Only after a legible replacement is received will the report be accepted and published. Employing these small changes will create added transparency for the public and a greater sense of trust for the candidates. The Election Law and Municipal Affairs Committee asks for your support on the motion of ought to pass with amendment on SB 530. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Abbas. The bill is now on second reading. The first order of business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The committee amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion or amendment? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 530. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass as amended is adopted. Senate Bill 530 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, to which was referred Senate Bill 300FN, an act relative to education training standards for voluntary certified heating equipment installers and heating equipment service personnel. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is inexpedient to legislate by a vote of 3-2. Senator Pearl for the committee.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 300, inexpedient to legislate. The bill sets certain minimum education and training requirements for voluntarily certified heating equipment installers and heating equipment service personnel. The bill was brought forward as a result of a tragic incident that resulted in a loss of life, which the committee is sympathetic to. The committee heard testimony that the oil and heat industry does a good job training its employees and that they felt the bill was not necessary. Large oil and heat companies ensure that new technicians are NORA certified and are closely monitored until they demonstrate proficiency. Questions were raised during the hearing as to the impact of the bill and if legislation was truly needed to avert future similar incidents. The Executive Departments and Administrative Committee ask for your support for the motion of inexpedient to legislate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pearl. The motion is inexpedient to legislate. The bill is open for further discussion. Senator Rosenwald.
Mr. President, I rise to oppose the ITL motion and to ask the Senate to honor the life of Catherine, who would not have died from carbon monoxide poisoning if just 3 screws had attached the flue pipe to her oil burner. To install or service oil heating equipment in New Hampshire doesn't require a license, and certification is voluntary. This voluntary certification requires core competencies. However, several years ago, the rules requiring technicians for keeping up with evolving safety codes, if they wanted to voluntarily recertify, were eliminated. This bill would make it so that technicians who do wish to voluntarily renew their certification keep up on evolving safety codes. Years ago, a little girl up in the Lakes region died in an explosion caused by a gas furnace that malfunctioned. And right away, the legislature took action to require licensing for gas fitters. Surely the life of an elderly woman has value too, and we can honor her by asking technicians who wish to maintain their voluntary certification to stay current in their field. Please vote to overturn this motion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Rosenwald. Senator Pearl to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. First off, I want to thank my colleague from District 13 for bringing this bill forward. As I stated in my opening comments, this bill was brought forward due to the result of a tragic loss of life, and the committee would listen to the testimony. We heard the things that were presented, and I certainly want to compliment the son of this fine lady that was lost in this tragic incident for advocating for his mom and for changes within the industry. But the industry responded. They changed the rules, through the rules process, they changed what the problem was, and they recognized it, and they've fixed it. They didn't need the legislature to tell them to do so. And for that reason, the committee looked at this and said, we certainly understand there was a loss of life, and it is tragic. We respect that, but we don't need the legislature here. Private industry has taken care of it. They've fixed the issue, and they train their folks well. They really do. I know there's a correlation that the senator was attempting to bring between gas and oil. They're two very different animals, so to speak. The gas requires a lot more training and a lot more issues to deal with than the oil heat industry does. And the committee felt that the industry had responded properly and that there was no reason for this legislation, so that's why we moved the inexpedient to legislate. So I would ask you to support the committee's opinion of inexpedient to legislate, and to please let's just let this move along and let the industry continue to do a great job. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pearl. The question is on adoption of the committee recommendation of inexpedient to legislate. Is there further discussion? Are you ready for the question? All in favor of the motion of inexpedient to legislate, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it, I believe. The ayes have it. The motion of inexpedient to legislate is adopted on Senate Bill 300. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 337FN, an act relative to doula and lactation service provider certification. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 7-0. Senator Pearl for the committee.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 337FN ought to pass. This bill creates a new obligation for the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification to develop a process to certify individuals in 2 new occupational certifications, including doulas and lactation service providers. The OPLC projects a certification fee of $300 for 2 years for each provider. The Senate Finance Committee recommends passage of SB 337FN and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pearl. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? The question is on adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 337. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted. Senate Bill 337 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 348FNA, an act relative to emergency crop relief. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill be referred to interim study by a vote of 7-0. Senator Pearl for the committee.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you again, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 348FNA be referred to interim study. This bill would have made an $8 million appropriation to the Department of Agriculture, Markets and Food to distribute emergency relief to farmers who suffered crop damage as a result of the unseasonable cold and floods occurring between January 1 and July 30th of 23. Rather than use general funds, the Fiscal Committee recently authorized the department to accept and expend $8 million in federal ARPA monies towards this purpose. The Senate Finance Committee recommends Senate Bill 348 FNA be referred to interim study and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pearl. The motion is refer to interim study. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of the committee recommendation of refer to interim study on Senate Bill 348. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of refer for interim study is adopted. Without objection, I would like to special order to the conclusion of the Finance Committee the next bill, which is Senate Bill 352, because Senator D, who is taking it out, is not here, and Senator Susi, who I know wanted to speak, is not here. So without objection, we'll special order it. I guess we'll special order the next one, too. I apologize. Senate Bill 352 and Senate Bill 363 are special ordered. Senator D had I think, a prime sponsor hearing, so he should be back shortly. So the clerk, the Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 387 FN, an act relative to State Parks Pass pilot program for recovery centers and community mental health centers. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 7-0. Senator Birdsell for the committee.
Senator Birdsell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 387 FN ought to pass. This bill requires the establishment of a 3-year pilot program for state parks passes for recovery centers and community mental health centers registered with the Department of Health and Human Services. This legislation has a total fiscal impact of less than $10,000 in each of the fiscal years 2024 through 2027. The Senate Finance Committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 387 FN and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Birdsell. The bill is on second reading. Is there any discussion? The question is on adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 387. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted. Senate Bill 387 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 393 FN, an act relative to making an appropriation to the Department of Environmental Services to fund drinking water infrastructure and dairy. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 7-0. Senator Birdsell for the committee.
Senator Birdsell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 393 FN ought to pass with amendment. This bill makes a $25 million appropriation to the Department of Environmental Services for the funding of regional drinking water infrastructure as part of Phase 2 of the Southern New Hampshire Regional Water Project to increase water supply to multiple towns impacted by PFAS contamination and growing water demands. The committee amended the bill to clarify that the appropriation is a combination of federal funds, the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund, the PFAS Remediation Loan and Grant Fund, and local contributions. The $25 million sum shall be non-lapsing. The Senate Finance Committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 393 FN as amended and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Birdsell. The bill is now on second reading. The first order of business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The committee amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion or amendment? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 393. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass as amended is adopted. Senate Bill 393 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 396 FNA, an act relative to making an appropriation to the Culinary Arts Program at the Wilbur H. Palmer Regional Career and Technical Education Center. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 5 to 2. Senator Gray for the committee.
Senator Gray.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 396 FNA ought to pass with amendment. This bill makes an appropriation to the Department of Education to fund the repair and replacement of ventilation and exhaust fan system for the teaching kitchen in the Culinary Arts Program at the Wilbur H. Palmer Regional Career and Technical Education Center at Alvern High School in Hudson. The committee amended the bill to clarify that the appropriation would come from the Education Trust Fund. The Senate Finance Committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 396 FNA as amended and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gray. The bill is now on second reading. The first order of business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it, I believe. The ayes have it. The committee amendment is adopted. The question is now on ought to pass as amended. Is there further discussion? Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to thank my colleagues from Senate Finance with the vote to pass this bill. This is a very, very important issue to my constituents in the town of Hudson. And I'd also like to have the opportunity to thank my colleagues from District 20 and District 4 who a few years ago assisted me in getting the money to the town of Hudson to actually build this new technical center. With this funding, this proposed funding, if it should pass, it will make the town whole. And these kids are receiving a great technical education at the Palmer Center. So I just rose to thank my colleagues in Senate Finance. So, and I'd appreciate it if you could vote for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carson. The question is on adoption of the motion of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 396. Seeing no further, I'm sorry, Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no disagreement that this is an important project for the students in Hudson. The disagreement was on the process and how we got to where we are. A couple of capital budgets ago, the money was found to allow Alvern to renovate its, Senator D here? No. To renovate its culinary program, and that was great. Hudson didn't spend all of the money that they were appropriated in the capital budget, and they wanted to spend the rest of it in paying for these, what must be gigantic range hoods. I think they would suck one of us up out the ceiling because they're really expensive. For the three of them, I think the total cost is $672,000. So these things are ginormous. Hudson didn't get formal approval from the Department of Education to repurpose this money before they spent it, and the Department of Education turned back the excess funds instead of saying, oh, wait, Hudson wants this, we are going to get that to happen. So those of us on the Finance Committee who voted against this were concerned about not holding people accountable for making sure they were doing things the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosenwald. The question is on adoption of the recommendation of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 396. Further discussion. Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise just to speak to what my good friend from District 13 said. This was money that was left over from the original project. And Hudson, the school in Hudson said, okay, let's see if we can spend this money and get these super duper hoods for our culinary art program. They did consult with the Department of Education, not once, but twice. And they were given the go-ahead. But in the meantime, the money was clawed back. So they went forward believing they had the permission to buy these hoods. And that's where things fell apart. So by giving them this money, this is what's going to make them whole. They just didn't pull a rogue move and decided they were going to spend the money on their own. They had asked twice, and they were told that they could spend this money. And unfortunately, there was a disconnect someplace, but they did get permission, and I want to make that very, very clear here today. They asked if they could spend that money twice, and it was confirmed twice. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Carson. Any further discussion? Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The motion ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 396 is adopted, and the bill is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 398 FNA, an act appropriating additional funds to the Department of Transportation for existing municipal bridges. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is referred to interim study by a vote of 7-0. Senator Innis for the committee.
Senator Innis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 398 FN be referred to interim study. This bill sought to appropriate $40 million of general funds to the Department of Transportation for the distribution of aid to municipalities for bridge aid and highway block grant distributions. The Senate Finance Committee recommends Senate Bill 398 FN be referred to interim study and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Innis. The motion is referred to interim study. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? All in favor of the motion of interim study, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of refer for interim study on Senate Bill 398 is adopted. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk. I apologize.
Could I request a 2-minute recess, please?
You certainly may.
Thank you.
We'll be in recess for 2 minutes. The Senate will be attentive to the clerk, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 452 FNA, an act relative to making an appropriation for the hiring and training of small business development counselors in rural areas of New Hampshire. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill be referred to interim study by a vote of 4 to 3. Senator Gray for the committee.
Senator Gray.
Move to table.
The motion to table is non-debatable. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 452 is laid on the table. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 473 FN, an act governing unclaimed horse racing ticket and voucher money. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is sought to pass by a vote of 7 to 0. Senator Birdsall for the committee.
Senator Birdsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 473 FN ought to pass. This bill removes the requirement for licensees to pay unclaimed historic horse racing voucher money to the state and directs any unclaimed live simulcast tickets and vouchers to the Governor's Scholarship Fund. Currently, both unclaimed historic and live simulcast racing funds are credited as lottery revenue. The Senate committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 473 FN and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Birdsall. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 473. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted. Senate Bill 473 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 494 FNA, an act relative to establishing a farmer assistant fund. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill be referred to interim study by a vote of 5 to 2. Senator Pearl for the committee.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 494 FNA be referred to interim study. This bill sought to establish a non-lapsing, continuously appropriated farmer assistance for natural disasters fund with an appropriation of $5 million for the biennium ending June 30th of 25. Suggesting the need for a standing committee policy discussion on such a proposal and the fact that the bill is better suited for biennial budget discussions, the Senate Finance Committee recommends Senate Bill 494 FNA be referred to interim study and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pearl. The motion is referred for interim study. Is there any discussion? I had to go all the way around. Senator Fenton.
I'm happy to be the quiet guy this time. Thank you, Mr. President. I do rise in opposition to the interim study, but I do want to thank my colleagues for working with me on this bill. Our state was hit very hard this past year. We had a late frost that decimated our crops, especially our apple orchards. We had a low of 25 degrees recorded in Concord, tying the coldest May 18th ever. Temperatures that dipped into negative 20 degrees in February decimated our peach crop, and this caused apple orchards and peach crops across the state to lose 100% of their crops. We also had torrential rains. This summer was the wettest on record for New Hampshire. The state got more than 21 inches of rain in June, July, and August, about 8 inches more than the average, and that in turn caused unprecedented floods. New Hampshire had more flash flood warnings in July than any full year on record. And communities from the White Mountains, Lake regions, Monadnock regions, and seemingly everywhere in between were hit over and over by these storms and potential flash floods. New Hampshire was also marked with a tornado touchdown, and our farmers were hit the hardest. That was about $10 million in damage for the state's fruit crop this year and $3 million in damage to our vegetable crop. We are seeing more and more extreme weather, and I truly hope that this past summer was a one-time thing, but I think we all know that this is going to be in our lives for a long time to come. I truly hope my colleagues and I can continue this conversation. We're going to lose agribusiness, tourism, and small businesses and generational businesses if we do not act. But again, I do want to thank my colleagues for the bipartisan support on this bill, and I hope the conversation does not end here for farmer relief. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fenton. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of refer for interim study. Are you ready for the question? Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly want to echo all of the thoughts that my colleague from District 10 brought up, except for the part about opposing the interim study. I think the committee voted to move this interim study on my recommendation. You know, recently we had this year's bad weather and all of the crop damage that had occurred. We mitigated that with some assistance with the $8 million from the ARPA money that we talked about in the earlier bill. I certainly want to continue the conversation. I want to assure my colleague from District 10 that the conversation will continue, but I think it really needs to be put through the proper process and have the full attention of the legislature by going before a policy committee and then through the budget process, as we do with many of these appropriation bills. And I would certainly encourage my colleague to stay in touch with me and other members of the Senate here, and we'll bring a bill forward next year that we can have this conversation and give it the thorough attention that it deserves. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pearl. Is there further discussion? Seeing none. Are you ready for the question? All in favor of the motion of interim study, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. The motion of interim study is adopted for Senate Bill 494. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 552 FN, an act relative to lapse of funds from the Education Trust Fund. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that it be referred to interim study by 5-2. Senator Innis for the committee.
Senator Innis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 552 FN be referred to interim study. This bill sought to require that amounts which exceed $175 million in the Education Trust Fund at the close of each fiscal year be transferred to a newly established Teacher Shortage and Retention Program Fund to be administered by the Department of Education. The department would be advised in this endeavor by a newly established legislative advisory group. A majority of the Senate Finance Committee did not agree with either capping the Education Trust Fund nor taking additional funds out of the trust fund. Therefore, the committee recommends Senate Bill 552 FN be referred to interim study and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Innis. The question is on adoption of the committee recommendation of interim study, and we are open for further discussion. Senator Soucy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to the interim study. I would invite my colleagues to overturn the motion so that I might actually bring in a floor amendment. The genesis of this bill was actually another study commission involving retirement and various issues. But the question is really about education funding. And it's a question that, if not this legislature, certainly the next is going to have to grapple with. And I understand that in the short term there's some concern with the amount of money in the Education Trust and the surplus. The surplus for this year, based on the information I've most recently received from the LBA, is about $183 million. This bill would cap the amount at $175, and then any excess over $175 would go into a very specific purpose, and that is to address our teacher shortage problem. My colleague from District 10 has been very focused on rural educators. In his district, there are certainly other programs. There are subject matter shortage issues that this money could be used to address. There was concern that beyond this fiscal year into the next, there may be even more surplus. The amendment that I would introduce would address that by capping the amount of surplus that could come out at $10 million. I think it's a very reasonable approach. No matter what we are going to do going forward with education funding, in order to provide education, we need educators. And it is clear that our communities are struggling. to attract educators, to keep educators in the profession. We've looked at various issues to try to help particularly new educators coming in to get on their feet. And I believe this would be one small step towards funding some of those very important initiatives. It does no harm to the Education Trust. As a matter of fact, our colleagues on the other side of the wall have even proposed eliminating the surplus, swallowing it up. Now, I don't think any of us really want to do that, but certainly looking at a small increment could go a long way towards helping with our educator shortage. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I would ask my colleagues to overturn the interim study so that I might offer another motion and potentially a floor amendment. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Senator Susi. Senator Innis to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I truly appreciate the comments made by the senator from District 18, and I do agree that this is a problem that we need to try to address to the best of our ability. But I'm not sure this bill is the way to do it. A big problem is the fact that there's very little direction for this advisory committee in the bill. It's largely undefined. So it creates a committee that advises the Department of Education and provides consent, but to what end? Is the money to hire teachers, to repay teachers' student loans? Is it to focus on areas with extreme need? And goodness knows Franklin, the city of Franklin, has extreme need in my district. And the bill doesn't really provide any direction in that regard. It removes money from the Education Trust Fund, which, in my opinion, is not something we ought to do. We should be protecting those funds. And I think this is a long-term problem, but we're trying to solve it with a short-term funding solution with uncertain cash flows. So you can't count on the cash flow from year to year being the same amount. And I think that makes it difficult to administer and to implement. It is my hope that we can help our communities to solve the teacher shortage problem. I just think this bill doesn't quite get us where we need to be. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Innis. Further discussion? Seeing none.
Second.
Senator Carson has moved for a roll call. So since Senator D'Allesandro is not back here, we will special order the roll call to when he returns without objection. Seeing no objection, that's what we'll do. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which is referred Senate Bill 553 FN, an act requiring that funds held by public deposit investment pool be invested in New Hampshire. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 7-0. Senator Rosenwald for the committee.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 553 FN ought to pass with amendment. This bill requires all the funds held by the Public Deposit Investment Pool, or PDIP, as it's known, be invested or deposited in New Hampshire. And as of the end of last December, the worth of the PDIP was $650 million. In working with the state treasurer, the committee amended the bill to assist her in transitioning to a new investment strategy when the current contract ends. The treasurer will establish investment criteria and may adopt rules pursuant to RSA 541A. The bill was also changed to become effective on passage. Senate Bill 553 would result in nearly $200 million more of commercial credit becoming available to businesses. Additional revenue would be generated for cities, towns, and the state, and more jobs and increased personal income would result. The Senate Finance Committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 553 FN as amended and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Rosenwald. The bill is now on second reading. The first order of business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Seeing none, the question is on the adoption of the committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The committee amendment is adopted. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you again, Mr. President. Senate Bill 553 is an economic stimulus bill. The PDIP, comprised of municipal cash reserves that now totals $680 million since the end of December, is currently invested entirely in other states and countries. We know from a study conducted last fall by New Hampshire economist Brian Gottlob what the impact of bringing this $680 million back to New Hampshire and investing it with financial institutions located here would be. Mr. Gottlob was able to evaluate the effect just on the commercial banking side, which is only 1/3 of the banking sector. His therefore very conservative model tells us nearly $200 million more would be available for business lending, especially for small businesses. Over 2,000 jobs would be created, and household income would grow. All of this economic activity would translate to municipal revenue growth of $60 million over 5 years, basically double the return our cities and towns are getting now on the yield rate from the current investment strategy. State revenues would grow by almost the same amount when all revenues from our various revenue sources are considered. And when the consumer lending side is added, revenue impact would be even greater. And I think it's important to realize that if we pass this bill, this entire amount of the $680 million would be secured and collateralized, which it is not now. I like to think in metaphor, and you all know I'm married to a cardiologist, so I imagine the public deposit investment pool as a circulatory system. And if we only look at the yield, we're only seeing the aorta, receiving blood just pumped out of the heart. But if we invest this money here in New Hampshire, we will get the entire circulatory system with oxygen-rich blood flowing throughout the body, even down to our fingers and our toes. And that's what this bill will do. It will put our money to work for our communities and pump life throughout New Hampshire. I would like to request a roll call.
Second.
And thank you.
Yep, it's kind of guy.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, a roll call has been requested. It has been seconded, but is there any further discussion? A question, Senator Birdsall of?
The good senator from District 13.
Senator Rosenwald.
Senator, thank you for taking my question. I think I might have misspoke when I talked to one of my town councilors. So PDIP and this new strategy are not going to be working at the same time. It's going to be either or, correct? We can't, they're not going to have a choice.
The new investment strategy will take effect at the end of the current contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Susi to speak.
Yes, Mr. President, just very briefly, the metaphor was exceptional that my colleague mentioned. I just want to give a little bit of history. Back in 1991, I was working at City Hall in Manchester late one night, and the climate seemed very odd. All of a sudden, there were all of these sedans that pulled up along Elm Street, and it was like in the movie Men in Black. All these primarily gentlemen in gray and black suits exited their vehicles, and then 2 hours later, there were all these pizza deliveries. That's when many of our banks failed. And there were people from the FDIC in our communities, there was concern, and that was sort of the genesis and the context in which the public deposit investment pool came into existence. I think we need to fast forward 32 years later, 33, my gosh, I'm old, but, and understand that this is a different climate, a different financial environment, and this is a truly, truly prudent decision for all of our communities, be they very small or very large. The sum of money that we're talking about, in excess of $650 million, is extraordinary. Now, here's the thing that's really extraordinary, and I just want to emphasize what my colleague said. That money isn't secure right now, as it would be in our local banks. Having that money in our local banks means that the funds will be secured, but even more importantly, our local banks and credit unions are going to then lend that money out. Under the Community Reinvestment Act, they are going to invest in all of our communities. Think of the difference and the impact that has the potential to make. Now, there's going to be a little time, the end of the contract, and phasing into this new process, but the potential for our state, for our local communities, is really, really extraordinary. And I know change is difficult for some folks, and I'm sure people have heard from library trustees or cemetery trustees. They're used to the system. They put their $20 in it. It's going to be okay. It's a slight change, but for the result it's going to generate, it's really going to be extraordinary, Mr. President. And I hope all of us could vote yes when our names are called for this roll call. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Soucy. I don't see any further discussion. A roll call has been requested by Senator Rosenwald, seconded by Senator Avard. The clerk will please call the roll.
Senator Gendrew?
Yes.
Senator Lang?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
Yes.
Senator Prentice?
Yes.
Senator Gray?
Yes.
Senator Innis?
Yes.
Senator Ward?
Yes.
Senator Rishardi?
Yes.
Senator Fenton?
Yes.
Senator Chanley?
Yes.
Senator Avard?
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald?
Yes.
Senator Carson?
Yes.
Senator Whitley?
Yes.
Senator Murphy?
Yes.
Senator Pearl?
Yes.
Senator Soucy?
Yes.
Senator Birdsall?
Yes.
Senator D'Allesandro?
Yes.
Senator Perkins-Kwoka?
Yes.
Senator Abbas?
Yes.
Senator Gannon?
Yes.
Senator Altshuler?
Yes.
Senator Bradley?
Yes. The ayes have it, 24-0. Senate Bill 553 is ordered to third reading. So before you leave, Senator Innis? So, Senator D'Allesandro, I hope your eloquence was well received in the House. Excellent. So while you were gone, we had the debate on Senate Bill 552 relative to the lapse of funds from the Education Trust Fund, the bill prior to what we just considered. We had the debate. We were ready for roll call. Senator D was not here. Senator Soucy, would you like a parliamentary inquiry?
Mr. President. Mr. President, if I know that with a simple floor amendment, we can provide some of the specificity that is needed to ensure that a measured amount of education trust fund dollars are used for ensuring that we recruit and retain more educators into our system, would I now vote against the interim study motion?
Thank you, Senator Soucy. I forgot to announce that Senator Avard has seconded the motion. Senator Carson for parliamentary.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I rise to ask the body to support the committee work that was done on Senate Bill 552, I think we need to be extremely careful when we are talking about our Education Trust Fund. I'm glad to hear that we have such a surplus, and I think we need to keep that surplus. As we all know, we do have the lawsuit that we have to consider that we are facing, and I think that we just need to keep that money intact until we have a definite path forward. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Please support the committee of interim study.
If you're in favor of interim study, you would vote aye. If you are not in favor of interim study, you would vote no. The clerk will please call the roll.
Senator Gendreau.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Prentice.
No.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innis.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Ricciardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
No.
Senator Chambliss.
No.
Senator Abar.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
No.
Senator Carson.
Yes.
Senator Whitley.
No.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Susie.
No.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator D'Allesandro.
No.
Senator Perkins-Kwoka.
No.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
No.
And Senator Bradley.
Yes. The ayes have it, 14 to 10. Senate Bill 552 is ordered to interim study. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 580 FN, an act authorizing the sale of toll credits to fund a newly established noise barrier construction fund for the design and construction of noise barrier projects. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 7-0. Senator Rosenwald for the committee.
Senator Rosenwald.
Mr. President, I move Senate Bill 580 FN ought to pass. This bill authorizes the sale of toll credits to fund a newly established noise barrier construction fund for the design and construction of noise barrier projects. Said revenue from the sale is to be non-lapsing and continually appropriated to the Department of Transportation. Expenditures from the new fund are subject to the approval of the Fiscal Committee and the Capital Project Overview Committee. This legislation takes effect July 1st of this year. The Senate Finance Committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 580 FN and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Of ought to pass on Senate Bill 580. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion of ought to pass is adopted. Senate Bill 580 is ordered to third reading. So we will now resume the two bills that we special ordered. The first one being Senate Bill 352, yes. And Senator D'Allesandro. I'm sorry, the Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 352, an act establishing an early detection cancer screening pilot program for active and retired firefighters. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with a vote of 7-0. Senator D'Allesandro for the committee.
Senator D'Allesandro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 352 FNA ought to pass. This bill provides a $5 million general fund appropriation in FY 2025 to cover the cost of a cancer screening pilot program for retired and full-time active firefighters in New Hampshire. Based on the 2022 New Hampshire Retirement System year-end data, approximately 3,600 plus individuals would be considered eligible under this bill, which caps screening costs per individual at $1,300. The appropriation is non-lapsing until the close of the pilot program. It's assumed that the entire $5 million appropriation would be expended over FY 2025, 2026, and 2027. And kudos to the Manchester Fire Department, who were very instrumental in getting this done. And one life was saved in Manchester because of this. The Senate committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 352 FNA and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator D'Allesandro. The bill is now on second reading, and it is open for further discussion. Senator Susie.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the motion, as I did last time around. As my colleague from District 20 indicated, This bill would spend a little money to save a whole lot with early detection of potential cancers, but most importantly, what this bill will do is save lives, the lives of those who put their lives on the line for each and every one of us every day. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Susi. The bill is still open for further discussion. Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, this is a great bipartisan bill. This is something that has been worked on slowly but surely over the past couple of bienniums. We realize that our firefighters, their uniforms, the things they wear to fight fires, are loaded with PFAS. And we all know about PFAS. How many bills have we had about PFAS in our drinking water? They have to wear these clothes. So it is important that we are aware of this. We have to do our very best to support them and especially take care of them when they are ill. And the first step of that is having this pre-screen program, Mr. President, so we can catch whatever cancer, get it early and get it treated so they can go on to live full lives here in New Hampshire with their families. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Carson. The bill is... Senator Susi has asked for a roll call, and I think everybody seconded it, but we're going to give credit to Senator Avard. The clerk will please call the roll.
Senator Gendro.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Prentice.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innis.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
Yes.
Senator Chanley.
Yes.
Senator Avard.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Carson.
Yes.
Senator Whitling.
Yes.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Susi.
Yes.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator D'Allesandro.
Yes.
Senator Perkins-Kwoka.
Yes.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
Yes.
Senator Bradley.
Yes. The ayes have it 24-0. Senate Bill 352 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred Senate Bill 363 FN, an act relative to wagering on simulcast dog racing. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass with a vote of 7-0. Senator D'Allesandro for the committee.
Senator D'Allesandro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 363 FN ought to pass. This bill, effective January 1st, 2027, prohibits the sale of simulcast wagers on dog races. Currently, there's only one licensed location accepting simulcast wagers in this state. In FY 2023, simulcast dog racing brought in $85,295 in revenue to the state of New Hampshire. The Finance Committee recommends passage of Senate Bill 363 FN and asks for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator D'Allesandro. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question is on adoption of the committee recommendation of ought to pass on Senate Bill 363. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Senate Bill 363 is ordered to third reading. And that brings us to the end of the regular calendar. We are at the conclusion of the regular calendar and will take up the bill removed from consent. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, to which was referred Senate Bill 483 FN, an act relative to establishing an Office of Regulatory Efficiency and Oversight. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill be referred to interim study by a vote of 5-0. Senator Carson for the committee.
Senator Carson.
Move to table.
Has moved to table Senate Bill 483. The motion to table is non-debatable. Are you ready for the question? All in favor of the motion to table, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Senate Bill 483 is laid upon the table. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, to which was referred, Senate Bill 484 FN, an act relative to the completion of birth worksheet for hospital institutional birth. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is ought to pass by a vote of 5-0. Senator Rosenwald for the committee.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 484 ought to pass. This bill defines the information and procedures for obtaining and recording information for the birth certificate and health information collected after a hospital or institutional birth. The bill would ensure that the Department of Health and Human Services will still have the same access to birth certificate information they currently have. The bill ensures health information is sent to the Division of Vital Records for public health use by DHHS, but eliminates the sending of a few personal identifiers. The bill would ensure that the personally identifiable information required by the Centers for Disease Control would continue to be sent, which will maintain the state's access to federal grant funds. And I'd like to speak to my motion. Thank you again, Mr. President. I rise to support the ought to pass motion. This bill is a revision of last year's Senate Bill 105 that this body passed 19-5. Senate Bill 105 grew out of a study committee the year before, which unanimously recommended moving forward with this privacy protection. This bill this year represents a better balance between the compelling privacy interests of 25,000 women and children a year and DHHS's ability to operate public assistance programs, conduct public health programs, and qualify for federal grant funding. The bill makes no changes to what is collected for a birth certificate, with the exception of changing maiden name to name before first marriage. This was suggested by the Vital Records Director. No changes are made to who has access to birth certificates or the consequences for falsifying records. Because the bill makes no substantive changes to the birth certificate, the department can still verify eligibility for public assistance programs and, for example, maintain oversight of the newborn screening process. The bill makes a change to the collection and submission to Vital Records of personal health information of mother and baby after a birth. As you may recall from last year, very sensitive information is collected about the mother, including when was her last period, did she have fertility treatments, did she have a vaginal delivery, did she have gestational diabetes, is she breastfeeding? Currently, all of this information and more is directly identifiable as belonging to her when it is sent to state government. Senate Bill 484 removes just 4 personal identifiers from the mother's health information when it is submitted to Vital Records: her name, her street address, her medical record number, and the date of her birth, substituting maternal age instead, which is acceptable to the CDC. The result is that we will collect identified health information about the parents and baby only to the extent the CDC requires and makes grant funding available accordingly. I have with me here today the CDC's own more than 50-page guide to filling out the birth worksheets. When states collect this information, the CDC awards grants. In our case, it's about $10 million a year. Significantly, nowhere within these 50 pages does the CDC require states to collect and submit the 4 personal identifiers the bill deletes. And I should say that this guide has 7 different ways of classifying diabetes and 9 different ways to classify hypertension. The CDC also confirmed through our federal delegation that they don't collect these 4 personal identifiers. And yet, DHHS continues to claim we will lose all that federal money if we do not continue to collect information that the CDC does not require them to collect for grants. So you might be wondering then, what is the price for which we sell the personal medical histories of granted staters every year to state government? It's $400. That's the value we place on the medical privacy of 25,000 mothers and babies every year. That's it, just $400. We know the public wants more privacy from government. The bill's improved balance of privacy and information about individuals is consistent with the privacy protection approved by 81% of the voters in our Constitution 6 years ago. And if you believe that a woman who decides to terminate a pregnancy deserves privacy from government, it is only consistent to extend that same protection to a woman who doesn't end a pregnancy. Mr. President, this bill maintains the proper balance between privacy and efficient state government. I urge the body to pass it, tell our citizens we respect their medical privacy consistent with federal law. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosenwald. The bill is on second reading, open for discussion. Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the body, I rise to oppose the motion of ought to pass for Senate Bill 484. And with the start of my brief comments, I want to thank and honor the continuous work by the senator from District 13 around privacy for granted staters. She has been a champion on this issue, and I respect that. But in this particular case, I'm going to ask for folks to think about this just a little bit differently. So I don't think it's any great surprise that you all know that I'm the state senator from District 5, the home to Dartmouth Health, which also includes Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center. Dartmouth Health is the home, the administrative home, and this is a mouthful, so I wrote it down, the Northern New England Perinatal Quality Improvement Network, which we call NEPQUIN. And for those of you who were here last year, you heard me talk about NEPQUIN. You heard me talk about the value of the work that they do based on the data that is collected from these live birth worksheets to collaborate, but really importantly, to shape the education, the training, and the care for our most precious, granted staters, our babies. And many times, because Dartmouth Health, Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, is the home of the state's highestly certified neonatal intensive care unit with 30 intensive care nursery beds, the most complex babies and their moms come to DHMC for their care. What we learn from the data that we bring in helps us shape, again, the care that we provide. We need to know about the moms during their pregnancy period, okay? It is just as important as talking about postpartum care. This is how we manage the future for, again, our most precious Granite Staters. Yesterday, I had the honor of being at a meeting with the Secretary of the United States Department of Health and Human Services, Secretary Becerra, and one of our United States Senators, Maggie Hassan, at DHMC. And it's not often that everybody comes up to Lebanon. I was thrilled to kind of be a host in a way and welcome folks. But before they came and met and did our fireside chat, they toured the neonatal intensive care unit. They toured the birthing center. Okay? They learned about the highest level, the quality of care, and the continuous work that this staff does through NEPQUIN to make sure that they are doing, again, the best job, evidence-based possible for our most precious Granite Staters. I want to read to you a section of a letter from Daisy Goodman. She's a constituent of mine, and she's a certified nurse midwife at Dartmouth Health. As written, Senate Bill 484 removes the identifiers from the health data which are collected on the birth worksheet. Without these, there will be no way to connect the dots between what happened during pregnancy and the care that new mother receives postpartum. We will not be able to measure whether the programs that our state legislature has supported through the Momnibus funds, and we have worked so hard to implement, are working to protect mothers and their families. Senate Bill 484 will hinder our ability to identify emerging needs, reduce our ability to evaluate maternal health initiatives, and ultimately could be harmful for Granite State families. There's a connecting of the dots that we're talking about and that our certified nurse midwife, Daisy Goodman, shares with us. I also, and I'm sure you all received copies of a letter from the Secretary of State's office that talks about the process that 484 would put into place that would impact their operations, that they have concerns and are looking for clarification on, as well as a letter from Health and Human Services that is very concerned and not in favor of this, and they do feel that federal dollars will be put at risk, and we heard this last year too. Okay, so we know that there's some discussion about how much and what would be put at risk, but when the officials that actually are working on these grant funds come to me and bring this, I do accept and honor their word. Also, just again, I want to talk about the identifiers, talking about maternal statistical information, which is foundational, and I'm going to tie this back to NEPQUIN and tie it back to Dartmouth Health and tie it back to the wonderful District 5. Foundational public health data collected by every state, including our state, to inform on the status of maternal and child health. So with respect to the good work that's been done, I stand, on privacy, I stand in opposition to this because I don't think it gets us there, and I think it puts maternal and child health in a situation where we can't really advance the evidence to do the kind of work that we need to continue to do at NEPQUIN for our Granite State families. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Prentice. I believe Senator Rosenwald has a question of you, Senator Prentice.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking my question. Would you agree with me that doctors have access to medical records upon which they can make care decisions, and that the department, except in corrections, state government is not a healthcare provider, but doctors have access to records so they can treat babies?
Thank you, Senator Rosenwald, for your question. I'm happy to respond. So at the time of care, yes, they do have access to the medical records. But what I have been talking about is after that care, in the period where we're doing research and making decisions and looking at actually how the care was provided, what the health of the mom was, both during their pregnancy, after their pregnancy, and the neonates, to make decisions again, but for NEPQUIN about shaping and advancing education and care protocols. Thank you for your question.
I recognize Senator Carson.
Move to table.
Senator Carson has moved to table Senate Bill 484. Senator Rosenwald has asked for a roll call. Is there a second? Senator Altshuler has moved to second. Parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. President, if I know that currently the state collects more personally identifiable medical information on 25,000 people a year than the CDC requires in order to give out grant money, and if I know that Granite Staters want more privacy from government in their personal lives, would I now vote no on the motion to table?
Thank you, Senator Rosenwald. Senator Prentice for a parliamentary inquiry. Okay. If you're in favor of the motion to table, you would say a parliamentary inquiry. Senator Ricciardi? Senator Ricciardi has moved for a 2-minute recess. All right, the Senate will come back to order. We had just recognized Senator Rosenwald for a parliamentary inquiry. Thought Senator Prentice was going to do one, but Senator Carson has requested a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. President. If you believe, as I do, that this bill just is not at the point where it can be passed, it seems that we need to have a balance here, and we haven't gotten that yet. Add to the fact that we are going to lose millions of dollars. In this state, we can't afford to lose that kind of money, so I would ask you to support the tabling motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Carson. If you are in favor of laying Senate Bill 484 on the table, you would vote aye. If you're opposed to that, you would vote no. Are you ready for the question? The clerk will please call the roll.
Senator Genbro.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Prentice.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innis.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Rishardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
Yes.
Senator Chanley.
No.
Senator Avon.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
No.
Senator Carson.
Yes.
Senator Whitley.
Yes.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Susie.
No.
Senator Birdsell.
Yes.
Senator D'Allesandro.
Yes.
Senator Perkins-Kwoka.
Yes.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altschiller.
No.
And Senator Bradley.
Yes.
20 to 4.
The ayes have it, 20 to 4. Senate Bill 484 is laid upon the table. I believe that there are two bills to be removed from the table. The first one, I recognize Senator Gray.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm very sorry. I recognize Senator Gray for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to remove Senate Bill 63 from the table.
And that is a non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to remove Senate Bill 63 from the table, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes, I believe, have it. The motion prevails, and Senate Bill 63 is removed from the table where the pending motion is ought to pass. Senator Gray, you have moved ought to pass, so the pending motion is on. The pending motion, I apologize. I have earphones that are still connected to my phone. I think that means I have to pay a fine.
I'd like to move Amendment 2024-0583S, and I'd like to speak to my motion.
All right. First, yes, you may speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just as a recap on this bill, this is one of the bills that we had non-germane amendments on between House Bill 154, which contained the original language from this bill as we got it from the House last year. We held a public hearing on both Senate Bill 63 and on House Bill 154 in October, the end of October last year. We brought forward an amendment to that bill in the prior session here, and that amendment got a 4-to-4 vote, so that we tabled that. We reworked the language. We removed the wording that talked about uniqueness that the senator from District 18 spoke against. And now, if you've got your amendment in front of you on line 9 and 10, it removes the words "and such other regulations related to public health" and replaces that with "or other similar threats to public health," and which ties that back to the wording in the original RSA, talking about nuisances, which is well defined in statute. This has been vetted by the Health and Human Services Department with the group of, I forget the exact title right now, but with the Health Officers Association, and they thought that they could work within this language, and therefore I would encourage my fellow senators to vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gray. Before we get to further discussion on the amendment, the chair rules that sections of the amendment are non-germane, but without objection, Senate Rule 317 is suspended to allow consideration of the non-germane amendment. Senator Soucy.
May I ask a question of my colleague from District 6?
Yes.
Thank you, Senator. I just want to make sure, you said that both the Department of Health and Human Services and the Health Officers Association, who had been opposed and expressed concern to the previous language, are both satisfied that this language is something they can live with?
Thank you for the question. The actual statement was that the Health and Human Services Department, who is the one that interfaced with the health officers, presented this language to the health officers, and they did not oppose. That email did not tell me Health and Human Services opposed or didn't oppose this legislation, and I don't want to put words in their mouth that wasn't in that email.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, without objection, I've ruled, you've ruled, that Senate Rule 317 is suspended to allow consideration of the non-germane amendment. Is there further discussion of the amendment? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the Senator from District 6, please, about his amendment.
Senator Gray yields.
Thank you, Senator. For the purposes of this amendment, could you define what the other similar threats are?
In speaking with the attorney that actually drafted this amendment, the question goes back to nuisances, and that is the term that needed to be defined in statute. And because nuisances is well defined, that it is well defined, in my opinion, that similar instances to the word nuisances as defined in other statutes are adequate.
May I follow up? Yes. Do you have a definition of that? Because in looking at RSA 147, it's about pests and trash and actually, expectoration. So I don't, other similar threats to pests, trash, or spitting. I don't know where that definition is. Could you clarify that for us, please?
Senator, I do not know.
No. May I make a statement? Yes, please. I could wait if it's...
Soucy first, then I'll recognize Senator Altshuler.
Thank you.
Senator Soucy.
1 minute recess.
Yes, you may.
Mr. President.
We'll be in recess for 1 minute. The Senate will please resume deliberations. We are in the discussion mode on Amendment 583. I recognize Senator Soucy. I don't recognize Senator Soucy. I recognize Senator Altshuler to speak or question.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Oh, wow. Then is there no further discussion on the amendment? Are you ready for the question? Everybody's ready for break. All in favor of the floor amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Amendment 583 is adopted. The bill is still on second reading, open for further discussion and amendment. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 63, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 63 is ordered to third reading. The Senate will please be attentive to the clerk.
We have to have someone stand up if they're going to remove. Who's Senator Murphy?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that Senate Bill 372 is removed from the table.
Senator Murphy has moved Senate Bill 372 is removed from the table. It's non-debatable. Are you ready for the question? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it, I believe. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 372 is removed from the table with a pending motion of interim study. I recognize Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. The bill as drafted increased the number of apprentices allowed to be supervised by master plumber from 1 to 2. The ED&A committee supported the concept, but there were some concerns about possible unintended consequences involving the possible loss of federal dollars for apprenticeship programs, thus the interim study motion. I ask the body to overturn that motion so that I can bring forward a floor amendment to address those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. The motion is referred to interim study. If you're in favor of that, you would say aye. If you are opposed to that and want an alternative motion, you would say no. Is everybody clear? Are you ready for the question? All in favor of the motion of interim study? Aye. Opposed? No. The noes have it. The motion of interim study fails. I recognize Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are halfway there.
He has moved, Senator Murphy has moved ought to pass.
Ought to pass. Mr. President, I move Amendment 815S.
You are recognized to speak on Amendment 815.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, after the committee brought forward their concerns regarding the bill as drafted, I had a meeting with representatives from OPLC and the Federal Department of Labor, and we worked together to craft this amendment that addresses those concerns. Essentially, it says that an apprentice does not need to be registered if they're not going to be using those federal training dollars, and not being registered, which is completely voluntary, would allow up to 2 apprentices per plumber. This is one small step to address the shortage we're having in that trade. I did share this language with the ED&A committee. I believe that the committee in general supports the amendment as it addresses those concerns, and I ask for your support as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. Is there discussion on the amendment? Senator Perkins-Kwoka.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to my colleague for doing further work on this bill. Unfortunately, I just, in the short time we've had this, which has just been today, we have tried to reach out to the industry. I think we all share the concern that we want to make sure we have enough tradespeople, in our economy, but we're still hearing concerns even about this version. And so part of the issue is that, as drafted, this amendment gives the master plumber the option to register or not the apprentice in the approved apprenticeship program, and I understand that intention is to make sure that we can accommodate the federal funding through the United States Department of Labor. But without registration, these junior plumbers essentially can't get an apprentice license. They can't be qualified as a journeyman. It really kind of limits their opportunities for advancement or ability to practice on their own. And so it feels to me, and I hope you will all join me, that there's potentially more work to be done here, because we certainly wouldn't want to give the impression to these young plumbers, that they're making progress towards something that they are not in their career. So I think there's still some technical issues, and I hope you'll join me in voting down this amendment and voting down the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perkins-Kwoka. Senator Pearl.
Question for my colleague from District 16.
Senator Murphy.
In your conversations with the U.S. Department of Labor and with the New Hampshire Department of Labor, did you receive an assurance that this amendment would not put the federal dollars at risk?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I did. I have received an email on Friday that stated that this amendment would mean zero risk in this federal.
This amendment does not require a plumber to have 2 apprentices, but simply allows them to do so if they choose?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Senator Perkins-Kwoka.
Thank you, Mr. President. So just to clarify, I don't want to restate what I said. I'm not sure about the federal funding for the Apprentice New Hampshire program, but again, I guess I would query whether these junior plumbers would be aware that they can't be registered as an apprentice, they can't receive a journeyman certificate if their master plumber chose to pursue this route. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perkins-Kwoka. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Senator Waters.
Question for the senator from District 21. So just because I'm way over here and can't quite hear all the comments, but is it true that if someone is not registered as an apprentice, they can't touch anything related to the plumbing system, they wouldn't be able to get an apprentice license through OPLC, they'd have no avenue ever to become a journeyman plumber, and they'd basically be a helper with no opportunity to advance? Is that is really the situation these folks would be in? Is that true?
That's what I understand, Senator.
Thank
yes.
you.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you. One of the benefits of the New Hampshire legislature, Mr. President, is that we are all people with real careers and real pasts and real lives. We are not professional legislators. We don't get paid $175,000 a year like our counterparts in other states. 25 years ago, I spent a year as an apprentice electrician. I climbed through ceilings. I hooked up lights like these. And that was a good year. I lost a lot of weight that year climbing through hot ceilings, but I got some good experience. To this day, I can wire my own outlets, my own lights and everything. Anyway, I was one of 6 apprentices overseen by a master electrician. So I know a bit about what I speak. It is absolutely not true that someone will not be able to become a journeyman plumber or even a master plumber if they take this, they become an apprentice plumber without this registration. The registration allows them to enter the federal training program, but it does not mean that they cannot then become a journeyman plumber or a master plumber in the future. And so I urge the body to pass the amendment. I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. Seeing no further, Senator Susi.
Question for my colleague from District 21.
Yep.
Joy. Thank you, Senator. The information that you have and the questions you have about still passing this legislation, can you tell me where that came from?
Sure. I would be happy to if I could find the piece of paper I just put down. So this information is coming to us from a member of the trade, from a plumber that participates in one of the unions, and so I would tend to believe someone that's a professional in the trade.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of Floor Amendment 815, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. I believe the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The floor amendment is adopted. The bill is still on second reading and open for further discussion and/or amendment. Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 372. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. I believe the ayes have it.
Roll call.
Second.
We'll see if I'm right or not. All right. Senator Susi called for a roll call. Senator Avard seconded. The clerk will please call the roll.
Senator Gendreau.
Yes.
Senator Lang.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Prentice.
No.
Senator Gray.
Yes.
Senator Innis.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Ricciardi.
Yes.
Senator Fenton.
No.
Senator Chanley.
No.
Senator Avard.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald.
No.
Senator Carson.
Yes.
Senator Whitley.
No.
Senator Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Pearl.
Yes.
Senator Susi.
No.
Senator Bertzel.
Yes.
Senator D'Allesandro.
No.
Senator Perkins-Kwoka.
No.
Senator Abbas.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Altshuler.
No.
And Senator Bradley.
Yes.
14-10.
The ayes have it, 14-10. Senate Bill 372 is ordered to the Committee on Finance. And now I recognize Senator Carson for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn from the early session, that the business of the late session be in order at the present time, that all bills and resolutions ordered to a third reading be by this resolution read a third time, all titles be the same as adopted, and that they be passed at the present time.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The early session is adjourned. We are now in the late session. Are there any announcements or personal privileges to come before the body? Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unanimous consent?
You're
Thank you. Jack Thomas Casey, captain in the United States Marine Corps, died suddenly in a tragic accident, along with 4 other crew members, February 7th, 2024, in Pine Valley, California, during a CH-53E helicopter training exercise. He's survived by his wife, Emma Lindbergh of Shepherdston, West Virginia, his mother, Catherine Robinson Casey of Dover, his father, James B. Casey of Andover, Maine, his grandparents, Jean Robinson of Portsmouth and Janice Casey of Dover, New Hampshire, and James Casey of Dover, New Hampshire, Hampton, New Hampshire, and siblings, James D. Casey and Kristen Tavares of Dover, Patrick Casey of Topsfield, Mass., Sean Casey and Caitlin Parsons of Nantucket, and Catherine Casey and Brian DeCredico from Berwick, Maine, beloved nephew of 15, favorite cousin of 23, amazing uncle to 6. Jack was born April 17th, 1997 in Dover. He attended St. Mary's and St. Thomas Aquinas High School, where he played football and lacrosse, as well as being a member of the robotics team. He then decided he wanted to serve his country in any capacity. He attended college at Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia. During his time there, he served as company clerk and earned his position of company commander for India Company his senior year. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Physics in 2019. He graduated from officer candidate school in 2018, earning a pilot's commission in the United States Marine Corps. He ran the Marine Corps' full marathon while training in Quantico. After training extensively, he earned his wings on September 20th, 2022, and became a skilled CH-53 helicopter pilot. He was promoted to captain on September 2nd, 2023. As a leader, he would carry people's burden and help them find a solution. When in doubt, flat out, drama was not in his vocabulary, leading by example in a calm, convincing manner. He did the right thing whether or not someone was looking. He was a fierce, loyal husband, son, brother, and friend. Our universe has lost a precious, rare, amazing soul. A solemn procession brought him home yesterday to Dover. And Dover and all of New Hampshire mourns and honors his giving the fullest measure to our nation and to our freedom. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Senator Innis for.
Moment of personal privilege, please. Sometimes we put bills in that are really important to us, and I had one of those this session, and I was reasonably quiet about it. It had to do with cytomegalovirus, and it went to Health and Human Services. It wasn't perfect, and I want to thank the chair, the senator from District 19, and the members of the committee, and our Department of Health and Human Services for getting that bill corrected and through. Cytomegalovirus is a nasty virus, and I know of it because my nephew Ethan was born with it, and we didn't know. He wasn't tested. His life has been hell, as has his parents, and yet, through the work of his mother, Heather, my sister-in-law, he's been brought along. He's now 18 years old. He'll never live alone, but he is a wonderful, beautiful young man. This bill encourages education and testing for CMV when a child is born, and that testing can change a life. There are hundreds, thousands of cases of this every year, and Heather has metastatic breast cancer, and it became important to me and to her that New Hampshire do this and become one of the few states that has done so. I'm grateful to all of you for passing it. It was on consent. I didn't mention it last week because we ran late, but this is big. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you from Heather, my brother Richard, and their son Ethan. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Innis. Senator Perkins-Kwoka.
I just wanted to stand up. Not that I'm ready to do it, but just to say thank you to all of you for the past couple weeks. I've received so many messages and so much care and just so many people helping me through this. And I just wanted to say thank you. You know, at the end of the day, there's only 24 of us, plus our, the staff and everybody that's here that really understands what it's like to be up here, and there's a lot. So I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciated all the expressions of gratitude or sympathy that people sent. I've gotten calls, emails, flowers, visits. I know a bunch of you were at the services over the weekend, and I just want you to know it means a lot. And I wanted to give a special thanks to Cam and to Jenny and to Senator Prentice, who has picked up the phone every time I've called. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perkins-Kwoka. Further personal privileges. Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. President. With all my spare time, I found myself reading the New Hampshire Constitution, and I stumbled across some of the qualifications for office. I just wanted to raise an issue with this body that I came across, that all members have to be 30 years of age by the time they actually are seated to be in the Senate, when their term begins. And I've learned that our good friend, our mutual good friend from District 2 was born February 29th, 1964. Which means next week he'll be celebrating his 15th birthday. So, before we potentially expel the member from the body, we should probably still wish him a happy birthday out of disrespect, since we won't be meeting again until after his birthday. We can all join together. I know that some senators are better at singing than I am, but I'll take the lead. Let's all do it together on the count of three, okay? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Senator Lang. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Congratulations. You're now an adult. First of all, just an announcement. Everybody have a great break. You've earned it. You've worked hard. So have a great time. So when we come back in March, I've spoken with Senator Soucy. We will be in session on March 7th and 21st, not on the 14th and not on the 28th, the 28th being the day before Good Friday and Easter weekend. We'll also not be in session on April 25th, which is school vacation. So I think for planning purposes, have at it, okay? So without objection, all personal privileges or unanimous consent or other remarks shall be entered into the permanent journal of the Senate per Rule 216 and 217. Is there any further business? Seeing none. Senator Carson.
I just had to put this thing away now. Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the business of the day being completed, that the Senate recess to the call of the chair for the purposes of introducing legislation, re-referring bills to committee, scheduling hearings, sending and receiving messages, vacating bills, and processing enrolled bill reports and amendments. And when we recess to the call of the chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Carson. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The Senate is in recess to the call of the chair.